So there's a lot of fear in the general population towards AI and what the possibilities it can have. And since we have like a very diverse set of speakers here, I was wondering if I can get like your thoughts on how. I mean, first of all, let's begin with what do you think is the ideal symbiotic future we can have? Like, is it like sort of like a completely dystopian? Have you already given up on humans? There's going to be, whereas just a stepping stone for the machines, and you've given up to your machine overlords, and you're just working for them already? Or do you think we can develop a kind of a symbiotic relationship, like a half human, half cyber kind of thing? Or do you think AI is going to be just like a tool, like electricity or some of the other tools we've developed, and it's going to help humanity reach the next higher bounds? So, Victor, why don't you start us with that?
Well, I think there are definitely interesting things going on that side. Just if you look at medical application or in our smartphones.
Yes.
So I bought, for instance, recently the AirPod, and I had never used Siri before, but then I became a bit addicted because it's actually very practical and there are lots of cool functionalities. So I think it's going to become more than just a tool.
Yeah.
To become to something that is symbiotic. I hope not, to be honest. But it's definitely going to have a greater impact in our lives. I mean, it already has. It has lots of applications that are very powerful, like you have surgeries that are performed automatically not like live, but they can do this kind of thing. So I think it's definitely going to happen on that side.
Jaydev, why don't you? Oh, sorry. Wait, go ahead. Right, go ahead. All right, Jaydev, yeah. Please add some light.
Automation, yes, and we're already seeing a bunch of it, but AGI is, yeah.
I'm waiting for the robot overlords though. I wish they come. I don't think they're coming anytime soon.
And AIs definitely won't be smarter. They have more computational power for sure, but they're not smarter than us. So, and I think like robot overlords are not going to take over. Sorry, because like we actually ourselves will become some sort of robots. Because if you told someone 200 years ago that you'll have a device on your phone, like you could use internet and everything. So we already a phone is technically an enhancement.
Exactly.
If I'm standing with my phone, I'm a cyborg. So I think there'll be a more there'll be a middle path where we actually become cyborgs. Like even today, a lot of disabled people have robotic enhancements.
Yes.
So I think that is what's going to happen. And with gene editing and all those stuff
Yes.
coming on, I think like we are going to become a better product. No one's going to come and replace us unless we have aliases.
But let's, examine the terminology behind this, because as practitioners, there's a lot of responsibility on us to dispel some of these myths as much as possible, because media is just going crazy with this, like no clue about what is happening, and they just love to write sensational stuff. So I was reading an article from Wired, which is a fairly respectable source, about a recent undertaking from OpenAI that they were planning to open source a lot of their really cutting edge work, which they wouldn't have done otherwise. And that like most people do open source their work anyway, but this was really cutting edge stuff, which they wouldn't have open sourced for decades. And the headline was OpenAI plans to open source pre-AGI AI. And it's like, what is pre-AGI? If you have an asymptotic curve, any point on that curve is pre-infinity. That doesn't mean anything. So why do we think that AGI is going to happen? Is because it's based entirely on Moore's law.
So AGI for the uninitiated is
Artificial General Intelligence. So Skynet, essentially.
basically.
Why we think it's going to happen is simply based on Moore's law. We know that computers are getting faster, and as Viral said in the morning, even that is getting saturated. Like we are already reaching that limit where the quantum tunneling effect starts taking place. So how are you going to control things now? Even if you were to build neural networks on quantum computers itself, that's only making things faster. It's like having a person do a lot of arithmetic and logic operations very, very quickly. That's what a faster computer means, which is not smartness at all. There is creativity, there is imagination, there's a lot of other things that require smartness. Like, I think the last time I checked, my IQ was greater than that of Richard Feynman. Does that mean I'm smarter than Richard Feynman? Clearly not. And again, IQs are flexible, they change over time. They change by how much you practice. It might be fixed with a. So, getting a really fast computer is like getting a really high IQ person, but that doesn't mean that that person is smart at all. So,
just fearing that AGI is gonna come and stopping our process now is not a right thing. So what do I say is, when smartphones came, the same concept was going on. When computers came, the same thoughts were going on. So it just keeps happening, and when you get there, you will have something else where we can survive together. Yeah.
Actually, like, if I have time, I like to elaborate on that. During the industrial revolution, when horses were driven by carts and everything, like people used to travel from one place to another with carts. This is a standard problem. Like, people suggested, sorry for the long language, that roads will be full of horse shit because horses are being used so often. But what happened was, due to industrial revolution, we had the steam engine, and there are better things. And like now we see that roads are not full of
Oh shit. Yeah.
so I think this is a very temporal problem, and this arises because there's not much awareness of it. As you mentioned, it's our role as people in technology that we also have informed opinions and correct people who have like a incorrect image about AI.
I just have a follow up to that question to that. You said it doesn't necessarily make us smarter, and even you elaborated on that. That I have an IQ which is higher than Richard Feynman. That doesn't make me smarter. What is smarter? I mean, we've given so brain is essentially could be characterized as a computation device, right? And there are models in place, logics. I mean, we don't exactly know how it works, but there's a certain amount of computation that it can do, and there are some structures there probably which can help it make logical reasoning and decision making skills, right? So if there is an optimization algorithm and we give enough compute, isn't that essentially what we are doing as well?
See, the thing is, we are giving, like, there was a bot which bet, like, even the best Go players, I think.
Yeah.
There was some sport.
AlphaGo.
Yeah, AlphaGo. So, although it will beat the best, smartest people, when you ask it to play chess, it can't. So, the thing is, it will only excel in one task. And as he mentioned, sorry, I didn't catch it. Jaidev. Yeah, as Jaidev mentioned, the scope of creativity allows us to be always better than AI. And as long as like the developers of AI are also human, they're not going to have robots overtake us, I think.
Do you think we're just being egoistic and we're just at such an initial stage that we don't know that what it's capable of?
definitely. But being able to surpass, say, the human brain in any kind of performance is not going to be done by breakthroughs in technology or breakthroughs in computing. It requires breakthroughs in neuroscience, psychology, and until that happens, we can't map the brain. So
Right.
there is a cusp that is, again, like it's at infinity. We don't.
The smartness is not about how we solve the problem. The smartness is about figuring out the problem. I think there humans will always excel any technology when it comes.
I sure hope so. So moving on to other technologies in AI. So PyData is an educational initiative started by NumFOCUS. So we take education very seriously. So what I wanted to ask was, since we have a couple of people from the West, and Victor here has lived in the West and India as well, and Viral has also traveled abroad extensively. So this is primarily to you. What does the West get wrong that India gets right in terms of education? And in what terms should we not? I mean, normally the opposite is asked, so I'm just want a different flavor to it. So, and what should we do differently? As in, normally the idea is that they're so far ahead of us. Again, we're not like too sure about that since we're proud, but anyway, what should we do differently? Where would things they have applied won't work here? Right? Like, so self-driving cars, they have nicer
I
roads.
think we'll figure out how to route our cars around the cows. I don't see that.
How will you boss?
And there will be too many of them anyway.
Yeah. So I think I think it's a very good question that what do we do right here, because it's often the case that it's always about what do we not do right.
Yeah.
And I personally don't think about rights and wrongs as much as playing to your strengths, right? And for better or worse, we have an education system that we've inherited from the British era, and it's continued in the way it has. Um, I I feel that a few things that personally worked for me, at least anecdotally, when I went abroad, was actually a very crisp thing I can identify right here is the joint entrance exam that we have here that you take after the 12th standard, right? Um, so I went to college in Mumbai, and there you had the option of, so JEE was not as big a deal as it is today, in the sense that many more colleges accepted. So it was either the IITs or you had to do the state board exams, and the state board exams were like at least 10 levels of difficulty lesser than the JEE. But preparing for the JEE actually gave me quite a bit of a leg up in all kinds of things where I don't see that happening in the West at all. So I feel that there is a stronger and stronger emphasis and more rigorous training in fundamental sciences, in fundamental mathematics. But we don't sort of tend to make the most out of it. We get sort of stuck a little bit too much in the rote learning and in our exams and grades, and we do not build on the foundations. But I think that's one thing that I think we do well here. In terms of what the Western universities have to offer in things like Coursera and just the internet have largely leveled out that advantage, right? I mean, you can take Gil Strang's MIT linear algebra course sitting right here. You don't have to be in his class anymore. So the differences are much lesser, and it's best to build on the advantages.
Just a footnote over there. We have Pranav and I are part of a study group that's currently doing the new Gilbert Strang course. Talk to us if you want to be a part of that group.
So I think I'll correct the question here. The question was brain drain, I think.
Sorry?
The question was brain drain. Was it brain drain?
Brain drain? No, it wasn't.
Okay. So I think like I'm an ideal candidate to answer this because so I just completed my computer science from IIT Kharagpur, and I have a lot of friends who are heading for CMU, MIT, Northeastern for PhDs, and I completely get it because the problem in even IITs is that there is a lack of funding. Like there are 2 or 3 servers which are being used by 27 or 28 people. So there is a severe lack of funding, and it's not like I can blame the government. Like the government is not paying us enough. The thing is, there are already a lot of things on our hands that we need to solve. Like where is government going to dispatch money for education? So the thing is, the thing that works in West is they have a lot of funding, they have a lot of contacts. Like my friend who will be going to one of the top colleges in US will actually be able to decide what projects he wants to work on. Rather, here it was the completely opposite. Like we knew that these projects are getting funding. These projects will go on for 2 or 3 years, and that is how we chose to work on those projects. But I think just the sheer freedom that people enjoy in the West, like at least academically. See, even the black hole image thing. Like I know for a fact that it has been working in progress since 3 or 4 years. In India, we simply do not have that much time. Like especially if I'm talking about PhD people, they do not have that much time or freedom. They have to constantly produce results. So I think the problem is we are not a developed country yet, and the lack of funding and multiple problems occurring together is why we have a lot of people going from India to outside for academic purposes.
Question still was, what does India get right? But anyway, Victor,
so-
anything to add there?
Okay, then in that case, India has done a lot of things wrong. Has done a lot of things wrong. It's getting a lot of things wrong.
That's true. Victor.
Well, so I don't really agree with that. So I've been in India for 2 years. So usually when I tell people that I live in India, the question I get is why. So I'm not proud of saying that, but most of the people like in the West, if you ask them about India, the first thing they will tell you is, "Oh, I love Slumdog Millionaire," which is awful. And I think when I came here the first time, I was a bit like that, and I realized I was very, very wrong. So India is seen as an underdeveloped country, but it is not true. So when I arrived here and I started to work with people from our Indian office, I had not an epiphany, but I could see what hard work actually was. So the first thing I can say is that I think in the West we got soft and lazy. So I think what you said is very correct. The background that you build during your years of schooling, uh, university and so on is definitely above the average in the West. A lot of people in the West would think they are very smart, but actually they are not. So when there was my review, what was the point of having you in India? I said, like, to be honest, working with people here, I've done more in 1 year than 3 years in London, and I think that's true. So then there is a slightly negative side to that. So I've watched Three Idiots. I love that movie. The competition is very fierce, and I think at some point a bit unhealthy. So through this competition, there is no shortcut. There are so many people like for so little number of positions that you have to stand out, you have to hard work, and sometimes I think it's misunderstood. People overdo it, while they actually have all the weapons already in their hands. And I feel sometimes that people think they have something to prove, when I don't think they have something to prove. They already, with who they are, what they've learned, the background, they tick all the boxes to get anything they want. But there is so much pressure. I've seen it from some of my colleagues or interns. The placement thing. So I haven't fully understood it yet, if I'm honest. But at the end of your undergrad, there is a process to get a position in a company, and I can see this is like the death row. Like if I don't get something, the familiar pressure and so on. And I think that probably goes in the wrong. I know there is a cultural reason behind that, but I think this is it's a bit of a shame, because there is so much that you can bring on the table, versus people from Europe, like me, I did 8 years of studies. I haven't paid a single pound. I grew up in a country where education was free. So I did bachelor, master, PhD, free ride. We have free healthcare.
Sounds nice, doesn't it? Yeah.
No, but and you get entitled to it. And I was like that. I was a hole, let's say. You take it for granted. This is normal. But then when you arrive here and you realize that actually, no, this is a privilege that we have, and people have less here and they are a lot happier, and they are not, demotivated. They will do a lot more. I think for me and my wife, that was a very tough lesson, good lesson to learn that. So I think it's a bit too harsh on India, to be honest. I think it will take time. There is a cultural, so I've been there 2 years, so it was what it was. But I think the people's mindset is changing. The people don't see India as a underdeveloped country anymore. I think people are realizing that people are very smart, they are hard worker, and people are starting to compare people in India with people in Europe. So, मुझको इंडिया बहुत पसंद है.
Hey, give me a round of applause for that, please.
One thing that we did get right was the JEE. But we have started going and gaming that also. So actually, I'll tell you a story which Prabhu Ramachandran said right here 2 years ago. He runs a rehabilitation program at IIT Bombay for kids who don't do too well once they are in IITs. And he says that the kids who are most likely to end up in that rehabilitation program are usually the ones who do exceedingly well at the JEE. Because they are trained to crack the JEE, they are not trained to be engineers. You'll go to Kota, you'll figure out how to game the system and you'll get into an engineering, but then it's all downhill from there. So there was one good thing we had, but like if you don't do so well in the JEE to get into the IITs, and even if you don't do that, if you take the JEE curriculum seriously enough, like Viral said, you are pretty much set with PCM for the rest of your life. Even if you don't know something, you can always learn it up. Like you have that confidence that I'll be able to pick that up. That was the one good thing we had.
Shruti?
I'd like to add a point. The amount of emphasis that India gives on maths and science in their primary and college education is nowhere. I don't think we can see it anywhere. The one thing which we lack is networking, and I think the networking, if we do enough networking, like all these conferences which have started, we just started doing all of this right now, and the only the privilege that the western kids get is this networking, and not a lot of technologies they learn, but they know how to connect to people and get what is good out of all the people. So if we could do that here, I think we could easily match. And as he said, it is only the population that is the problem here.
So
I'm going to add a small point about the pressure from the parents, right? I can guarantee you 100% that every single one of you, when you become a parent, is going to apply the same amount of pressure on your kids, not any lesser.
One standard line which every Indian kid has heard. Sharma ji ki bete ke do dimag hai.
It's all for Sharma ji ka beta. So, so on similar lines, talking about education, a lot of people starting out get confused between what to do and how to begin. So there's a language war going on, Python versus R, and people get too stuck up on it. So that's what I was coming to. So Python versus R versus Swift versus Julia. There's no chronological difference out there. I mean, it's just not order. There's no order here. But when does it start mattering, or does it not matter at all? So let's start with the person who made Julia himself.
So a lot of people actually ask me this question. So that now that we have this Julia thing, should I drop everything else and just start doing Julia? And my answer is usually no. And first of all, I don't believe in the concept of a monolinguistic approach. There's always the right thing for the right job. So Julia was built for a particular purpose, and it does exceedingly well at certain things. And if it helps you achieve those goals, you should absolutely use Julia. I would not use Swift for doing numerical computing. I would not use Julia to write iOS applications, right? So that's how I see this. And nobody in this room only programs in one language, right? It just doesn't happen anymore. And so things like language interoperability, being able to build larger applications, out of a combination of things is just how the way the world is going to be. And even if you yourself as a specialist program in one thing, you will always end up in a larger team doing many different roles and many different systems and languages. So that's my view on this.
Kaustav, anything to add there?
Yeah, so the thing is, I'd like to quote a web series for this, that if you know the algorithm, programming language does not matter. So, see, the thing is, right now, sometimes people become too focused on the means rather than the ends. So, what language you actually make your solution in does not matter, as long as it is efficient and gets the job done. So, there are a few languages which are preferred for getting started into and everything, but it's simply a matter of what feels right to you and what's best for the job.
Shruti, anything to add there?
Code in a language which you can take it to production.
Spoken like a true engineer. So I guess I can summarize with every language has its place, but you don't have to get too worried about initially when you're starting out or which language to start from. Figure out what circumstances, what you need, and just pick a language.
So one more thing to add.
Sure, go ahead.
When you're starting to learn something, you probably use a top-down approach where you start coding and then you learn the concepts. When you start in that case, with a language which has a lot of support. Start with that language, learn the concepts better, and then you can switch to any language which you want because your concepts are very good. You can switch to any language which you want.
So I have a question. I'm Brijesh. I work on community development in a remote part of India in native language. I don't focus on English. So I focus on logical thinking, algorithm thinking in native languages. So I learn their mother tongue and work on it. So my question to you guys is like, sometime like when I was part of Niti Aayog and Atal Tinkering Mission was in their peak. So Intel came on board and they had have our boards and we give you all the funding, have our hardware, and they were brute forcefully trying to implement their social acceptance of technology the way they want. But as a community developer, I wanted to keep the flexibility of having free will to choose. So my question to you guys is the problem I face, how to ensure the social acceptance of technology, the way they understand the definition of technology rather than the way we want to define it. So people have their own definition of technology. They have their own understanding of system and computers. I want to keep that definition intact based on their understanding. Then I give them just options to choose from to make them accept. So as a AI ML guy, we may come up with very nice solution for some specific problem. My question to you guys is what's your take on social acceptance of it? And what's your approach towards that? Julia, you might have come up with nice solution for a very specific things. So what was your approach for the social acceptance?
Well, I mean, the thing that we do when it comes to sort of building the Julia community is very different from the kinds of things I heard you talk a little bit yesterday about the projects you do, and it's really amazing what you're putting together. But at the end of the day, I guess it's the same idea, right? That you're trying to get a message across to someone, and maybe trying to have them see what you think is the right point of view or something new, and maybe influence them in certain ways. The word that's often used is evangelism, right? So you're evangelizing a new idea, a new concept, a new way of doing things. And it's I'll tell you that one place where we face a lot of challenges is in building diversity in our community. And I think in the Julia community, I presented our stats. We found from our annual developer survey that we have only 4% women in our community, or at least 4% of the people who took the Julia survey were women. And I think as I look around the room here, the ratio of men to women is just wrong, right? It's not representative of what it was when we went to school. It's not representative of even if you went into the science stream, right? Forget. So computer science especially suffers from this, and this is a thing that we focus a lot on. I don't have any answers. In fact, I'm always looking for them. So I don't have a way to answer your question. I only have more questions, and to a certain extent, things like YouTube have helped, right? So the talks at this conference can now be viewed by everyone everywhere. You don't have to be here. You don't have to learn Julia in a classroom. You can learn it online. You don't have to learn linear algebra from Gilstrang. You can learn it online. So there's a lot of that, but I don't think any of these things are answers, or otherwise we would not have had these ratios that we're seeing here.
So I'm glad this came up because it's a wonderful segue to my next question. Diversity is a big issue here, as you can all see. So at PyData, we constantly try to improve diversity, the inclusion of women and other communities. So what have you guys done personally, either in your professional setting or in personal lives, to improve diversity, to include these groups of people who have been subjugated for extensive periods of time, and to bring them up to a level where we are at equal standing ground? Shruti, why don't you begin with Sudan?
So diversity in data science is very important, specifically because here solving a problem is not about which technology you use. It is mostly on defining the problem itself. If you have a diverse group, it's not just about male and female. It's about other a way you look at the problem itself differs, and maybe I only think in one way. If I can add another perspective to it, maybe it is much better to solve the problem. And I would say the main problem of women is something about there is actually a gender diversity, and especially if you go beyond 35 years of age. I don't know how many companies around are very welcoming for the women who are going on maternity leave. This is one issue which I'm facing. Like, I have a lot of friends who are with me who have taken a break of about 1 or 2 years, and they have not just been idle. Also, they have done some courses, they have taken up some projects on the side, and they've worked. But still, not many companies are welcoming. This should change, at least in the startup scenario, where it is easy to implement. They might have done a lot of good work till like they're 30 years of age, and just because they took a 2 year break, it is very hard for them to come back. Is there any company which does this, or do you guys do something about it?
If like I was still in a like I was still in college until like May or something. So the thing is, every college has a chapter. Like it was started by Sheryl Sandberg. I like the name is like I'm not able to zero in on the name, but there are like women in tech. There are chapters. I'm not Lean In, yeah. So Lean In has a chapter in most of the colleges, and like I think most cities have them as well. What you can do is from your side provide mentorship, like try to identify not just like ladies, but try to make it your own responsibility that you mentor people who don't have as much experience or who don't have as much resources. So and like perhaps find out what are the groups in your city which are promoting diversity. Like and I think a lot of people are not so much informed about conferences, hackathons. There are a lot of hackathons and like events, like even PyCon US, let's say for instance, they have a lot of scholarships, especially for underrepresented groups. So I think sharing an awareness, like he mentioned, is extremely important to ensure that like we are not going to reach 50-50. That's fine, but uh, it, that is one step I think for improving diversity in tech.
So I would just like to add something. Even in my company, GoCheck, we have several women, girl-specific hackathons which are happening, and different type of referral bonus which we give if I refer a woman, and if she gets hired, I get a different referral bonus than a normal person. So these are some initiatives which most of the companies are taking to increase the ratio. All I'm talking about is this. It all happens like we have good ratio, but the one main important thing that I find is like women greater than 35 years are not, like, we can see a huge dropout at that stage. So this is one thing. Even there are other initiatives which I think like a lot of startups are taking up right now.
I think in the industry particularly, it's very difficult. So what you were saying, like the 4%, unfortunately, like when you look at the CV of applicants for a role in data science or computer science, unfortunately, statistically, this shows up again. I think like 2 years ago when I was hiring for some roles, I got 100% of CV for men. So then, so the NumB is a UK-based company. So in the UK, gender equality is a very important thing. And for the NumB, they embedded it as it's a core value of the company. It's not something that comes on top of it. So recently, I had to hire someone, and I was given 50% of CVs women and 50% of CV men. So it's a small step. I understand it does not solve everything. So when I was talking about using NLP and machine learning for recruitment, so one of your questions was about how do you ensure there is no bias toward gender? Unfortunately, it is difficult, but I think the mindset is changing. So startups are definitely a lot more proactive. But same way, when you have a legacy system, it's very difficult to move an old machine. But I think this is changing. I think there is definitely something going in the right direction. But this is everywhere. My wife is German. In Germany, kindergarten stops at 3, which means that if a woman wants to have a child, one of the father of the mother has to quit his job because there is except if they can afford a nanny. But they have to sacrifice a career. So I think that's something that is global, but I think it's spreading at the same time. It's going in the right direction. I can see it happening very quickly. So I like that.
Certainly hope so. But would you have any, if you have any direct recommendations for pirate? So this is in a professional setting. We can have more maternity leave. We can support uh, women-friendly programs, or universities can have certain groups, etc. But what can PyData as an organization do better? What can we do better besides just mentoring to help, and we can certainly spread more awareness, but any direct recommendations what we should do as a community to encourage more people to come up to us and attend these events?
Well, one of the low-hanging fruits there would be to tie up with Django girls, women who code, Pi ladies, Linux chicks,
Yeah.
and invite them to organize. That's a very low-hanging fruit which can be grabbed easily.
Standard approach, like what most organizations do elsewhere, is they have scholarships, and like that is one way to encourage people. Like if you select, like let's say a girl gets selected on the scholarship, like let's say the travel and everything is paid for, it encourages other girl juniors of that person to also apply. So at least, like, I think the first step to speak at a conference is basically attend enough, and then you get the hang of it. Like, okay, I think scholarships is one of, perhaps it's a low hanging fruit as well, but yeah.
Viraj?
Yeah, I can share what we've done with JuliaCon, and not that I think we've done, very much along these. Not for lack of trying, but we have sort of gone, and seen larger participations from women in our conference over the years, and that has been largely the work of our diversity committee. So we actually have a committee that's focused on raising sponsorships for diversity and then awarding them for travel and for conference attendance. Um, the one thing that I was very happy to see at PyData, which was emphasized yesterday evening, or was it today morning, was the code of conduct, because many of the conferences are places that are ripe for misconduct, not to the knowledge of the committee, but knowing that there is an explicit code of conduct, and the way to reach out and to have a safe place is actually, I think, one of the things that is increasingly being done. We do it at JuliaCon. I was very thrilled to hear that you guys have done it here as well, and I think apart from that, many of the other ideas that all of you guys have spoken about. I mean, there's probably many more, but I don't. One quick question is the committee itself diverse enough? Yeah. Right? And I think at least when I was here, I interacted with many volunteer members, who were women, and so I was kind of. I think you guys are doing many things right, but you still have a lot to do.
Yeah, there's a long way to go.
And the problem is not something that PyData can fix, right? The problem is that women do not go from science into engineering as much, right? For their degrees, and there is an intake problem more than what you see. I wanted to quickly point out the question about the maternity that you brought up is not specific to tech. Mm-hmm. It's specific to all streams of work in India, and I think fixing it is probably a legislative problem that the government may want to take up, and it's been done in I think in many European countries where there is affirmative action for addressing the issue.
No, it is not just about the maternity leave, which I think almost all companies give. Like,
I mean the induction.
Yeah,
post.
to bring them back in, like a lot of people work in IT, and the thing is, it keeps evolving. That is true. IT, it keeps evolving, but it is required for a lot of people to take a break. But even though my company offers me a 9 months of paid leave, I would be required to take an off greater than that. And when I do that, it is really hard for me to come back.
I think like this is a excellent like place to discuss this. What issues do you think related to the maternity leave come in tech but not in other industries? Like, I think just informing others might help.
Which is not there in other industries. So see, IT is one profession which keeps changing, which keeps evolving a lot. If I work in a teaching domain, me taking a 2-year break is not just a big deal. If I take a 2-year break here, I don't know, like a lot of technologies which people are using now, I might be outdated. But the issue is, Even if a girl has done a course on that, or if she has done a project separately, people don't value it. They say that you don't have industry experience on the same, and I'm not ready to take it. And they have a point basically. So they say that when I get another person with same level of experience, with who has worked on real problem, why would I hire you? Like, this is a question which every company asks, and I think there should be a way to tackle this.
Do you know of, like, have you, because see, clearly this is a problem that concerns you. So have you, like, perhaps you might have imagined some solutions for this, right?
So what I would say is, like, give a bit differential, like maybe you give a assignment or something like which on real problem which you are solving, something like a hackathon which can be, which will help us to prove that she can do it, maybe, and then hire her.
Well, I will also add that everyone on the panel and in the audience agreed that technologies do not matter; it's concepts that matter, and so maybe the people hiring should also believe the same thing.
Should know this, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
If any of you ever write job descriptions, do not put names of libraries in them. Seriously, this doesn't matter at all.
So moving on to our last topic. Given what's happening recently in Hong Kong and in China, facial recognition has been used for a lot of bad uses. So in China, for example, there's like a social security system. A social system now where if you have, let's say, broken a signal, then you can't board a flight because they actually through check-ins you have a check system that you're breaking the law and then you shouldn't be allowed to, even if it's for minor problems. So, and in Hong Kong, similarly, they're stopping. The government is pressurizing and putting the protesters. Stopping their protests through AI technologies. So, how much do you think the people developing these technologies are to blame for the adverse effects of these technologies? And at the time of building these things, how much should we worry about them? Jaidev, start with you.
I'll answer after Viral does. It's obvious why.
So I actually take a slightly different view than So I actually visited China for the first time very recently, and at least from my limited visit, I felt some of these issues blown way out of proportion in media, and maybe it is worse than what I saw. Maybe I don't know, but I feel that this is not the first time our society has faced these kinds of questions, right? We had the same questions with atomic energy, right? Can we use it for peace, or are we going to use it to build bombs? Or we've had the same problems with just about any technology, right? So technology by itself is neither good nor bad. It's what use you put to it, and we've learned how to deal with it in the case of other technologies, right? There are export restrictions for sensitive technologies. You may require a certain level of training for certain technologies. They're not easy to often buy. We have a very well developed legal framework around sensitive technologies that could be put to nefarious uses, and I have no doubt that if communities at large realize that we do not want face recognition as a technology because it's too dangerous, I think we as a people will take collective action about it, just through the regular processes that work if in India it would be a democratic process. In China it would be the process through which they air these grievances within their system. But I think it's ultimately about the people and never about someone somewhere deciding for you.
Victor, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think recently what happened in Hong Kong with we're talking on Reddit, like there was this video where the people were fighting back, so the police was trying to identify the people with facial recognition, so they were fighting back with some lasers and smoke, and I think it's exactly what you're talking about. I think there are some limits, but then can you blame the guy who invented this kind of technology? I think that would be a bit unfair. It's, as you said, the regulation around it. It's the same thing for the self-driving cars. If someone dies, who is responsible? The company, or which put the car on the road, or the developer in his garage who wrote this software. So I think it's a difficult one, but we'll see.
All right, so we're very, very short on time, so we can only take a couple of questions. Anyone from the audience?
about. So the question that I have is about language agnostic modeling. So I heard that there was a project that Wes McKinney and Hadley Wickham were working on. I don't recall the name right now. Yeah, there's Arrow, but they have there's a website that has come about. They're calling it's on a name of a constellation. Anyways, so they're working on a programming language modeling packages. So what do you guys think about going into that direction, right? Where you don't have to worry about, say, if I want to use a library for a specific reason, right? So, for example, stats model. It does a particular job. It gives me some sort of outputs. I want to use that in R as well and get similar results, maybe because of some functionality. And so looking ahead, if I have a modeling package which will work, it doesn't matter in which language I'm programming, it'll get the job done for me. So what do you think about Buzz?
I personally think that more interoperability is always a good thing. So having data formats that are common across languages. I'm not familiar with this new project, but Arrow was definitely the right step in that direction. And I know that people in our community are working towards building Arrow support into Julia. And I would highly encourage it because it's just a data format. It's just how you store bits on storage, and so there's no reason for everyone to have slightly different versions. But we also understand how these things evolve, and there's a historical context to it, and it's always a constant struggle trying to get these things done. The people at the front line who are actually building these systems face the brunt of it. But I don't know about this project, but I would applaud the effort as being in the right direction.
We just have time for one last question. The gentleman over here.
Thank you. My name is Mukul. So recently I was reading on this site, HBR, Harvard Business Review, wherein it said that very soon in the future, there will only be two jobs. One is of the artists and second is of the engineers, the people who create things. And that also means and the coders, I believe. And do you agree with that? And then, there was another argument onto that, just to conform to that the best skill that people would want to hire you for will be creativity. What do you have to say for that?
For a moment when you said HBR, my heart stopped for a minute. Because every time somebody says HBR in this context is that infernal article about data science being the sexiest job of the 21st century. I'm glad you didn't quote that article. Please proceed.
I think I'm not sure if you've heard about Naval Ravikant, but he has the same issues. And see, the thing is, art is not just painting, drawing, and dancing. We can define anything as art. Even a barber is an artist because, I think art is what separates us from AI, what separates us from other animals. And I think celebrating that fact, whether we can be individual, because art is what separates us as individuals as well. I think so. I'd absolutely agree to that the creativity of candidate matters.
Sorry guys, that's all the time we have. So please, a big round of applause for all the panelists here.